Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Anmol Goel to the show. Anmol's journey is truly remarkable, starting from a modest one bedroom home in Delhi, which was located near the largest waste dump in the city, where five family members shared a single room. From those humble beginnings, he has risen to become an inspiring young entrepreneur and a venture capital expert. With a background in mathematics and economics and a diploma from Harvard, he has helped scale over 46 startups globally, with current clients generating over $28 million in annual recurring revenue. And he has even been featured in the New York Weekly 40 Under 40 2025. Anmol's story is a powerful testament to resilience, vision, and grit. And I truly believe today's conversation will be jam packed with inspiration for our listeners. So I'm very, very excited to welcome Anmol Goel to the show. Anmol, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you very much for the kind intro. Halfway through, I was like, "Really? I've done all of that?" And then I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah, definitely your inspiration, Anmol, and starting off at such a young age. So that's I can't wait to deep dive into everything. So before we deep dive into your business journey and your mindset, I want to know a bit about you personally. So do you mind sharing a little more insights about your personal life and your business, so our listeners can get to know you a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as you sort of mentioned, had a relatively humble start in Delhi near Janakpuri. I've heard a lot of people would know it there. And my parents worked tremendously hard, sort of getting us from a low middle class family to middle class family here in the UK, which I think is a massive, massive, difference in the two worlds. So I saw how much hard work, how much sacrifice it took there. So on my personal side, I always had that thought of, if I can just do a little bit for mum and dad, it would make all the world's difference. And, coming from a middle class family, money was always a topic of concern, right? There'd always be discussions and talks regarding it. So, ever since I was 14, 15, I started working. I started by mowing lawns. I started by, working at the local accounts, just doing paperwork. I worked at Primark. I did accommodation tours at university. And then, when I turned 18 and had the availability, I started trading and started getting the local jobs around the area. I started my first startup when I was 18, which didn't go to plan. I can dig into that, but then the second one and so on and so forth, and started growing that, and eventually got to the point where I knew 2 cents about what I was doing, and then always was very dedicated on the professional side, and my initial thought of how to make money and how to sort of do well was it's actually a funny story, was an inspiration from Wolf of Wall Street, and I'd recommend it to everyone. But that was sort of the initial thought of, wow, I need to go into investment banking, and that's where all the money is. So at the age of 20, got into JP Morgan, realized it's nothing like the movies. It doesn't work like that. Especially, I was the COVID cohort. This was 2020, right? So decided to then pivot and go into wealth management. So went through the ranks of Marsh and Mercer under Marsh McLennan, looking at big risk
Nice.
insurance, and then pension funds and allocating large capital and risks across those pools. And during the same time, I decided, I should go into venture consulting. The reason was two-phased. One, I had been a founder and now I'd been a consultant and sat on the capital allocator side. So, I'd taken the three big chairs, which, you need to get a holistic view of, what it makes successful startup, right? And the second reason was I had a girlfriend at the time, so paying bills and having something on top was necessary. And so jokes aside, decided to jump into that, realized I truly love it. And this is something what I want to pursue. And one thing led to another. Started with very small companies, working with founders, individual founders, two-man teams, three-man teams, and grew it from there. I think I remember my first advisory gig that I did. My first payout was $40 for the initial hour of consulting. Right, so I still remember that. I have that transaction screenshotted and saved in my phone. All right, this was August 2022. And from there, got the opportunity to work with a few angels, allocate their capitals, and as I gained experience and started delivering value, I started being invited out to speak and grew that into a venture studio. Started working with family offices, started getting bigger capital, got better understanding of the industry, and long and behold, last year we ended up investing and facilitating about 54 million. Off the back of that, I decided to launch my own fund this year, which again, happy to jump back into a bit more. And yeah, that's where things are.
Amazing. Yeah, I can't wait to deep dive into your business journey as well. But I read one of your LinkedIn posts. You said when you were young, you were called as freak or people laughed at you. So I want to know, like, how did that affect you? And how did you start turning that perception around as well?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Look, when you're trying to break away from the crowd, right, there's always going to be people pulling you down. And, the biggest reason for that is they hate to see, what you're doing and it sometimes makes them realize that you are doing, what's truly meant for you and this took them away from what they truly could have been. Right. So there's two stories of it. And first one was actually when I was at university and I was launching my, second startups. The first one had failed. It was a fintech company pretty much, building out signals and quant algorithms for smaller sort of hedge funds and trading funds to sort of do macro analysis. COVID came and I didn't have enough, one, didn't have enough resources, second, not enough knowledge in place to sort of sustain that. And then the second one was a prop tech company. And I remember sort of, just building it up and getting my first sort of check of 2 grand as a customer. And I needed to build a lot of momentum for it, and messaging like 300 people a day on Facebook to, get the next sort of clients and sell it to them. Pretty much in layman's term, what it did was it would look at gov.uk, which is the UK data set here, the government data set, and it would look at what the average price of a house, what the average price per square foot is in a certain postcode, and then it would look at your in UK we have Rightmove and Zoopla, but for American audience, Zillow, right? It would go onto these platforms and look at any houses which were 25 to 30% below market value in that particular postcode. So pretty much AI scraping before AI was there because I was a coder and did maths. And I was like to my friends or people whom I thought my friends were that, hey guys, I'm doing this. Can you just post this? Like, can you share it? Right? No cost to them. And they were like, I don't want to be associated with this. Right. So, you have those moments where, and at that time it was a moment of weakness, and you were like, I wonder why people are doing that to me. And then similar thing, when I got into work, when I initially sort of started doing the venture consulting thing, everyone was like, yeah, dude, go for it. Why not? And then I started doing well. And, people would, and I would often come into work and people would make remarks or say stuff that I was like, a true friend would never say that, right? And the funny thing is, the more attention you give to it, the worse it will get. The more people can see they're getting under your skin for whatever reason, right? Whether it makes them feel small about themselves, so they're trying to target you, or whatever sort of the case might be. I think my way of dealing with it was like I'll prove it with my actions, right? And to a certain extent, I did. The funny story, and you asked like how, I reacted to or whatever, and my reaction was one of them recently came up and asked for a job. So, tables do turn, right? And they ended up doing their degree and their whole shebang, and end up getting.
Yeah.
I don't want to say end up getting nowhere. That sounds a bit too cocky of me, and I don't like to perceive myself as that. But I think the person above, he's watching it. He turned things around for me, and when this person came up to me and was like, "Hey, bro, you're doing great," and I was like, "I know," and I was also trying to do great 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when you didn't pay any attention, and he was like, "Yeah, would love to get a job," and I was like, I'm a big believer in working with people, and fortunately, your personality isn't something I'd be keen to have on the team. So I think you have your opportunity, and anyone listening who's getting pushed around, shoved around, or people are, I'm sort of discouraging them. It's going to happen. It's happened to the best of us. I mean, and I think if you're not getting that, I think you're in the wrong circles, right? If you just have, people just yay backing you, saying everything you're doing is perfect, I think maybe it's time to change the circles. And I think part of that really gives you the resilience. And I'm one of those people who are like, oh yeah, watch me. Like I love that sort of contestment of people telling me I can't do something or laughing at me just ignites me. And I think you need to find that person inside you and just have that true belief. And honestly, if you stay consistent with it, you will get there.
I love that answer. And you're basically taking it as fuel to
Absolutely.
push you to forward. I think, yeah, I love that. What drives you? Did this drive you to prove people wrong, or it was something else that was driving you?
Yeah. I think the two biggest drivers for me were, one, I had too many people to prove wrong, and one, too many people to prove right as well. So, I'd always been a very sort of family person, and my thing was always I want to give back. I want to have a ton of stuff, right? I want to have the nice houses for mom and dad. I want to have the nice cars and whatever for them as well. I don't really care much about valuables for myself. But one thing that I did want to have for myself was leaving a legacy. I think, it goes back to one of those things of just like being brought up in an area where, people are just fighting for survival every day. It just taught me to be everything but average because this world, it's a harsh place and it will eat you alive. So I think, then going up from there and building, again, I don't think I have accomplished or I'm at the top or whatever, but I think I'm starting to get there. And now that, I'm getting some recognition for it, and some people are saying that like, you know, inspired by what you said, especially after doing my TED talk, right? A few people came up to me and mentioned that, and I was like, that's just even more of a reason to just continue pushing it because there's so many more Anmols or Siddhants out there who think and who have been told by the world it's not possible just because the area you come from or the way you look or whatever sort of the case might be. And I want to stand out there and say it doesn't matter. All right, you put in your work and you go all in and it will happen. And same on the other side, it's the fire burning from the people who said, "You'll never make it. You won't be able to do it. You're not good enough." Right? It's that ever burning desire of, "Fine, watch me, and I will do it, and I'm constantly trying to do it." Yeah, I think it's a good combination of both things.
I'm fired up right now. And more, and and you know what people say? Oh, I'm struggling with motivation. I'm struggling with this, but there's motivation like everywhere. We just have to be self-aware of like seeing it as a motivation, taking it as
Yeah.
fuel. I love that.
I think
And
just to also expand on that a little bit, I think not going to cuss on your show, but I think motivation is BS.
yeah,
Right.
I
I think
agree.
motivation comes and goes. And if you only worked or worked out or whatever when you're motivated, you'll like for example, if I only worked when I was motivated, I'd be a failure. Because right,
Yeah.
motivation will come and then it'll go back down and it'll come and it'll go back down. And results need to be consistent. And consistency requires discipline. And discipline is a habit which is I feel shit today, I'm still gonna get it done. I feel great, I'm still gonna get it done. If it's raining outside, it's cold outside, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna get up and get it done. And it's a habitual, right? And it's the statement is fortune favors the bold, but I think fortune favors the discipline, right? And if you consistently work hard, there's no way you won't make it. Right. I haven't met anyone who's been consistent, hasn't cheated, hasn't given up, and has worked through something for a decade and hasn't achieved it. It just doesn't happen. Right. So motivation will come and go. Motivation is great. I love moments where I do have that extra ignited motivation, but it's all about healing and disciplining yourself and getting through consistent habits and behavior which will perpetually lead you to get to your goal.
Love that answer and definitely agree with that. And you also mentioned like discipline and hard work. So I have a follow-up question because I did listen to your TEDx and you mentioned like you have a super strong work ethic. So my question is, how does a work ethic look like in terms of like what time you wake up, what time you studying or working till, and like what's the advice for the listeners? How can they develop a strong work ethic?
Yeah. I think a lot of people will listen to this and they'll think psychopath, right? That's what I think. I mean, I'm not the big sort of work-life balance guy. I think there are times where you need balance in your life and you need to take a step back. But I think rather than in everyday life, it comes in phases. And right now I'm young, I have energy, I have fuel. I don't have to worry about wife and kids. Again, I recognize I come from a very privileged place now that I don't have to worry about that. A lot of people, they might not be in the same position. So I take complete advantage of that and I'm full on. So yesterday I went to bed at about 3:45 in the morning, right? Because I was recording, I had to go to the gym, and then I woke up at about 8:50. So about 5 hours, 5 minutes. So that's my usual 5 hours, 5.5 hours. Sometimes I'll get very lucky and get 6 hours, right? And then on top of that, because I'm traveling to about 6, 7 countries a month, right? I'm doing about 10 to 12 flights a month. So it is very, very hectic. And I completely understand it is not healthy. Anyone who's about to say otherwise, I do recognize that. But for me, I also understand the opportunity which I have currently. Know if I just continue at this pace that I have been for the last sort of 8, 10 months, for another 10 to 12 months, I will be in a position where my kids' kids will never have to worry about money again. I've already, at the age of 24, got to the point where if I don't work for another 5 years, right, not even a single day, I'm fine, right? There's not many 24-year-olds old out there who can say that they're on their own 2 feet, they've done that. But five isn't enough. I want 500, right? And that takes a certain sacrifice. And I think life is always about sacrifice, right? Either you're sacrificing your youth for your future, or you're sacrificing your future for your youth. And it's up to you what sort of decision you want to make. If you want to, go party and go rest and get your 10 hours of sleep, and be, in that work-life balance notion that people sort of say nowadays, fine. If that's what works for you, but don't expect greatness to come out of that. Greatness requires sacrifice. You're gonna have to give up sleep. You're gonna have to sacrifice seeing friends, and I do that. I wake up around 9, 8:45 to 9, spend the first hour doing my emails, going through everything, messages. I'm pretty much on, if I'm in London, or if I am sort of somewhere sitting down, spend sort of most of my day up till sort of 6:30, so sort of the next 8 to 9 hours in the day just on meetings. I'll try and get through about 14 to 15 meetings throughout that. Um, I take one break for about 15 minutes to have lunch throughout the day. And right after that is when I'll try and do sort of deep work, and away from the meetings. And I'll try and go through the notes, the data, the follow ups, or whatever needs to go through. And then I'll head to the gym relatively late in the night after having dinner around 9. So around 10, 11 p.m. is when I'll go gym. And then I'll come back and then I'll do my last bit of, sort of deeper work where I'm just putting everything together. Maybe at those are times I also have some US calls. So a lot of the guys who are based on the LA San Francisco side, they're 8 hours behind. So sometimes they're like, the only time they can do a call is afternoon their time, right? So 4 p.m. their time is midnight my time. Like I have a call that at that time today. I had one yesterday, right? So getting through that kind of stuff, working through that. But I do completely recognize it's not for everyone. And if it's not, that's fine. You have to find out what works for you. I'm of that brute mentality of just push it through no matter what, you'll get through it. It's not a recognizable sort of skill that everyone can attribute to. So if it doesn't work for you, maybe you need to recognize how you can do it, work smarter, not just harder. But this is what has been working for me, and I'm going to continue that.
Yeah, definitely agree. And do you like struggle with burnout then, or how do you cope up with that? Or do you have like days where you're just resting or recharging? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Burnout is a big issue, and it has occurred to me a couple of times, right? So hence why I mentioned work-life balance comes in phases, not days. So there will be, sort of times where, I'm recognizing I'm overly tired and I won't be able to do it. So, I'll do sort of 2, 3 months of very hard, deep work where I'm just going all in, and then I'll try and take 2 or 3 days off, and just, spend time with family. Again, my days off is still working about 4, 5 hours a day. But, going from working 16, 17 hours days to 5 hour days, it's fine. Or I'll go, take an extra day off. For example, when I was in LA last month, we had a massive yacht event, family office event leading up to it. Very, very strenuous, but I decided I'm going to take extra day to go there. And all I did was just sit on the beach, the pier. I, traveled. I went to Gold's Gym, right? It's been my dream to sort of go where
Yeah.
Arnold and Sylvester used to train. I went to the Hollywood Boulevard, got some nice ice cream, went up to the observatory, and that was a great day off for me. right? And then the next day we were back in it. And then, I did sort of a similar thing when I was in Turkey, took 2 days off or just traveled around the city and then, met some cool people. So I think you need to recognize when it's coming. And I think also partly is recognize when you can push past it. I think I've gotten really good at understanding where my body's limits is and how to push it, right? That, if you always stay within your limits, you'll never grow. So sometimes I tell myself it's mental. And
Yeah.
actually realize that. So every now and I go to visit my mum once a month, and there's been a couple of times where I've been slightly ill when I've gone to see her. And I know every single time I've been there, right, I've felt a little bit more ill or a little bit more lazy. That's because I know if I'm ill at mum's house, she will comfort me. She will make the
Yeah.
food. She will say, "Don't worry about washing up. Like, I'll do the dishes." And she'll bring me the warm blanket. And even though I'm not too ill, it'll make me a little too relaxed and I'll feel more ill. Whereas if I'm at my apartment in London and I'm feeling a bit
Yeah.
ill, but I have meetings and I haven't had food, it's, well, tough. You get up, you do your meetings, you make your food, and even if you are ill or burnt out, well, you get stuff done. Sometimes I think it's the mental play of like, if you tell yourself you're tired, if you tell yourself you're just
Hmm.
completely burnt out, you will be, but I do recognize it's an important issue, and hence why I actually invested in a company, called Prescribe Life, where one of the things they look out for is recognizing burnout, right, and
Hmm.
how to sort of recognize that and take preventative steps and speak to coaches and speak to guys who have better understanding of it. So I sit on both sides of it, but I definitely you need to
Yeah.
understand, where the limits of your body are. And I think the only way to sometimes understand it is to go through that phase and realize, okay, this is where it stands, and I can afford to push it 1 or 2% above.
Love that answer. And all the greats that we have, Michael Jordan, Kobe, or like Elon, all of them have one thing in common, that is strong work ethic. So definitely agree with that. Let's deep dive into your business journey now. So what inspired you to start your first business at such a young age? And you said you have a story about it when you started at 18. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I think, when I started going into university, and I think I was always very movie influenced, very sort of persona influenced. So I remember all the the Steve Jobs, the Zuckerbergs, all Mark Cubans, they all started their sort of companies in universities, right? So when I was going there, I was like, this is it, right? This is where I, make the breakthrough startup, and this is where things will sort of start. So, and at the same time, I'd been trading cryptocurrency for a while. I'd been understanding patterns. I got into Forex, sort of year on a year, towards my last year of 6 months, about just about a year over. And understanding, how stochastic movements are, how daily moving averages works and other sort of indicators, right? And that was sort of the time I realized, okay, I'm doing well. Like with my little money, I think I started with about 126 pounds myself, and then took a £1,000 loan from my dad to sort of really kick this off, and I scaled it well, right? I scaled that. I think into about 6,000, right?
Wow.
So sitting at around 6x return in just shy of 4.5, 5 months. So, that was sort of one of those things where I was like, okay, I mean, now I look back to it and I go, what a fool. But, because the market was going up, momentum was going up, and, anyone can make money in the upside market. And obviously at that time, I didn't have that knowledge. So at that point, I was like, clearly I'm doing something great. So I need to share this with other people. So the idea there was like, if I can understand certain patterns and charts and movements, I can create certain algorithms and signals for others to copy over, and then I can take, a couple basis points of what they're earning, and also if I create a good enough community, I can charge for that community. So that was the initial gist of what I wanted to build. But long behold, COVID came and took all of that away.
Yes, I do have some questions for you on that as well. But what initial struggles did you face when you were starting this business, and how did you overcome it? Because you were 18, right? And you had university going on, other priorities. So how do you overcome that struggles?
Yeah. I mean, it was the same thing, I've been sleeping sort of 5, 6 hours ever since I was 15, 16.
Right.
Right. So it was the same thing, when you're younger, right? I would say up until you're like 27, 28, you can just push through it. right? Obviously, I'm not doing that every single day. I'd say, this is happening 60% of the year, and then, a Saturday or a nice Sunday, or every now and then I'll take a break and we'll get the longest sleep. But you know, I just had that sort of drive where I was like, no, I need to get it done. I think there was something in me, and there's still something in me burning where it just doesn't let me sleep. I'm like, no, I haven't done enough. There needs to be more to it. So my thing was like, and especially first year university, because I did maths, further maths and economics, and I was doing a maths and economics minors degree. The initial content, I was like, dude, I know this, right? I don't need to spend too much time on this, luckily. I mean, I still worked hard, but I was getting through it fine. And especially then, as the exam seasons came, it was just pretty much going through content which I knew, and I'd find time in the night. I'm a late sleeper, so that work from PM to sort of 2, 3 a.m. was like the perfect time for me. No distractions, people aren't up, and I think a lot of it is also about choices, right? So universities where everyone sort of goes ham and parties and whatever. I was never into that. I mean, I did go out once or twice, a month, and but it just wasn't appealing to me. The thought of being in a sweaty crowd where you're getting elbowed or pushed around and everyone's just drunk. I was like,
Yeah.
it doesn't appeal to me. I don't see, the appeal for it. I was like, I much rather be in a nice, luxurious place with a ton of money, right?
Yeah.
And I would just go with that thought. I was like, why would I be out there, right? Where the floor is sticky and people are just yelling. And I was like, yeah, this is not for me, dude. I went a couple of times and I was like, yeah. So luckily I didn't have that burden of trying to sort of fit in, and like I said, at the earliest sort of age, I recognized that I don't need to impress everyone, right? And I think that's where a lot of youngsters sort of fall down. They try and chase validation with everyone, and they waste a lot of time with that. Whereas with me, I was like, you don't like me? Okay, fine. I'm still gonna make money.
I love that. I love that. And I think many people are afraid of like what other people would think nowadays. And in India they say, "Oh, log kya kahenge." I think that's
Yeah,
huge in that. So, what's your advice on like how can someone build resilience towards like the judgment of others and really not care what other people think and just go after every goal they have in
yeah.
mind?
I mean, you said it, log kya kahenge, which the song in response is log to kahenge, log ka kaam hai kehna.
Yeah,
Or the English viewers is like people will always say something, that's their job,
yeah,
right? So I mean, it's bound to happen, right? You can never please everyone, right? They will, even if you're doing good, people will have something to say. Or you just have to get to the point where you recognize, actually, that doesn't matter, right? Their views, their opinions, if they're not paying your bills, if they're not putting food on your table, if they're not putting clothes on your back, it doesn't matter. And yes, it might be detrimentally affecting you currently, but in 5 years' time, these people aren't even going to know where the hell you are, or vice versa,
so
right?
true.
There were so many people that I look back that had made comments, and I have no idea where in the hell they are, right? They just disappear. So if that little comment, and you just got to think about it, that if that little comment restricts you from going and chasing your purpose, and you go down the line and just realize, man, what the hell, what for? All right, 3, 4 months later, this person went to a different city, or for a different job or whatever,
Yeah.
and they're not even here, and I let him or her affect what I was going to do for the next 10 years. Why? Right? So instances like that will occur where you just realize whatever they say is futile. It just really doesn't matter in the long term, and just focus on that.
Yeah, agree. And we'll be like when we are like 80 or 90 years old, we will never think back, oh, what he said or something. It'll just be whether we executed a goal or not. So
Yeah,
yeah, I agree.
exactly. And I think Alex Hormozy said this, right? Where he was like, a lot of people are this revenge bound of, someone said something, and I need to prove it wrong, and I need to do this or do that to them, and chase, and I think that's all, that having that bitterness is also a really bad thing. And he mentioned, success is the only revenge. It's not the best revenge, it's the only revenge.
Mm.
Be so good in yourself that they all fade into oblivion. You can't even
Love that.
realize what they've said, and what sort of existed, right? Because it's so much focused, and that's starting to happen now, right? There was a point where all these voices of sort of what I heard through school, university, jobs, it would always play back in my head. And then when I really started putting myself, start of 2024, just really applying myself, and opportunities started coming to me, and I had, you know now I know royalties, sports stars, big VCs, investors, billionaires, they all just, faded into oblivion. And now every now and then they will come and like my post, or they will comment, and they will say, man, he's doing so well. And then I would just laugh. I was like, yeah, fair enough. But it's all gone, because that's the only thing you can do. Become so big, right? That they all just fade away.
Love that. Love that answer. I think I saw one of your videos that you said, like, in business and life, being bold is quite important. So why do you think that boldness is an important trait?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons is, if you're not, a lot of people just step over you. You need to be very strong with your precedents, and what you sort of wish to hold. Whether it goes through or not, having that awareness and that presence is super important, right? No one wants to do business with
Yeah.
someone who's shy, timid, and can't really have confidence with what they're saying, right? If I was saying this exact same interview, regardless of if I'd achieve the same things or not, with a timid voice of, I think someone should work hard, because
Yeah.
you'd be like, dude, what is he saying? I mean, he
He
doesn't believe
doesn't
in
believe in it
himself.
himself. Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Right. So I think upholding that
Yeah.
character is super important. I think I go through imposter syndrome all the time, right? So there would be moments where I would sit in my room and go, me? Really? Like, what's going on? And that happened. When I closed sort of one of my largest deals, about 128 million, right? And
Wow.
we closed part of a funding round of it. And a big check came into my account, and I think I just had to sit on my bed, and I was like, me? Right? And that was sort of, you know, and that will happen completely. It's happened now, and I'm sure it's going to happen in the future as well, as I grow and get more opportunities. But you can't let anyone see that when you talk, when you have your presence, it needs to be bold, it needs to be shining. You need to have confidence within which you say, and that's developed over time through hard work, through value, through ability of recognizing what you have and what you know is enough. That's why people are coming to you, right? The fact that people are recognizing you and are asking you to come speak or podcast or publish or whatever the case is, they should recognize something within you. So you need to recognize that within yourself, whether it's fake it till you make it, right? Whether it's chanting affirmations in the mirror, whatever it takes to sort of get it done,
Yeah.
get it done.
Right. So what's like your self-talk like as well when you were sitting on that bed, seeing that check? What was your self-talk like? Was that okay, I've done it, or I don't believe in myself? But how do you talk to yourself to change that imposter syndrome around?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it took a moment, and it was the realization that all these people, especially on the work side, which told me that I couldn't do it, I won't be able to do it. I realized in 1 week I've made their annual salary. And yeah, and it was just that realization. And I was like, it's only up from here. Like, it took
Yeah.
a second, right? And then I collected myself, and it was just very much like, this is now a next level I've hit. And now it's even more from here, right? So that was the single transaction. That was my first month making $100,000 in 1 month, right? And then the next goal was like, cool. Now the next target is quarter of a million in 1 month. Right. So I'm really good at just, going from, okay, now I've achieved it, where to next? So it took a second where I was like, wow, great, amazing, shock, surprise, ton of emotions in one, acknowledgement, now I've done it, happy, what I wanted to hit, cool, what's coming next? Right. Always have your next goal. I think again, this works for me. I'm not sitting and trying to advise anyone here, but this is just, again, my 2 cents. People get very caught up in the middle range, right? I think often we ask people, so what do you want to do in the next five? Right? What do you want to do in the next 5 years? Next 5 years. And I think 5 years is a weird phase where it's not short enough nor long enough. Right. The statement is, people always overestimate what they can achieve in a year, but underestimate in a decade. Right. And five is in that weird place. So I always operate on two views and mindsets. One, what is the end goal? Right at the end of the line, in maybe, not death, but what's the goal in 20, 30, 40 years? And what's the goal in the next 6 to 8 months? And just focus on that. The middle path will figure out itself. You know the end, and you know the next step. people always sort of focus on this 3, 4, 5, 6 year plan, and then they just forget what the hell is right ahead of them, right? So you focus on your next step and just remember where the big picture lies. And every now and then, as you're progressing forward, just look up and see, okay, has that goal moved? If to, where? The middle will figure itself out, right? The middle
Yeah,
will always come. The day after tomorrow is there, but before that is tomorrow. So just focus on that.
I love that framework, having 6 months and then the long term as well. And just a quick reminder for our listeners as well. So, from the humble beginnings where Anmol started and now where we are, don't forget that and keep that in mind as an inspiration. So, probably people have just forgotten, like, now where you started. I think it's quite important to just set a reminder on what you have accomplished from the day you started, and quite an inspiration. And Anmol, you also invest in startups, right? And they always say, like, oh, 99% of the startups fail, or most startups fail. So how do you know, like, which startup is worth investing, or do you have any strategy to do this, or you get to know the founders, you invest in the founders? What's your strategy?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a very long answer. But I think it's a mix of a few things. I think definitely in the very early stage, if I talk about, because we have three different channels. We have a early stage arm through our venture studio. We have a VC fund that we're launching, which is sort of seed Series A stage, and then we have a multifamily office that does growth stage investment. So in different vehicles and asset classes, you need to look at things from a different perspective. But if I talk about early stage, right, where I'm assuming most of your audience will be. I think
That's
one of the
is that the seed stage, or which
that's the
stage is?
pre-seed and early seed
Okay.
stage. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, that's your guys who are sort of sub 50K a month revenue and under. It's they're at that sort of point. So in that sort of stage, I think one of the biggest things that we like to look at, and it splits across into four quadrants and plus one, I would say. The very first thing that we look at is product and product differentiation, right? So what have you built in the market? What exists currently? How are you differentiating? If you've built something which is 5% better than what exists right now, then I mean, the speed at which AI is developing, you'll be out of the market in the next 5 months. So we don't need that. So how different is the product? How unique is the product? How is it serving the market, which hasn't been done yet, or you've recognized something within it hasn't been done yet, and you're going to try and capitalize. Then the second thing moving ahead from that is the market itself. So how big is the market opportunity? We like looking at stuff where the TAM is at least 10 billion and above. The TAM is your total attainable market, right? So how big is that TAM? How big is that opportunity? Because ultimately in the next 5 years, we'll expect you to try and attain 0.5 to 1% of that market. Is that feasible? If the market is too small, it's not, or the market is declining, it's not going to be feasible. Then the third thing we sort of look at is the team itself, right? So we most of the time like to go for second time founders or founders with executive experience, and the reason for that is they've gone through the struggle of what it takes, or startup is a difficult journey. I mean, kudos to anyone who gets into this journey, but it is very very tough, and times will come where you just want to pull all your hair out. You don't know what the hell to do next, and first time founders, the most of the time that it doesn't work out is they recognize and they go 9 to 5 is fine. So that's why we would prefer the second time founders or founders who've been in the executive role and they really know what they're doing. And adding on to that part as well, their team of advisors. So, whom have they been able to bring on so far? What does it take, right? Because the very first few guys that are going to come on board may not be investors directly, but these advisors, they will be guys who are VPs and directors at FANG and big institutions. So if they're buying into your company, why are they, right? What are they seeing? And also part of the founders, I like gritty founders who have made the most out of the penny. I don't like founders who are got a great idea, now give me a million. I think a lot of Silicon Valley guys are now doing that, and a lot of guys in Europe are like, Europe needs to have more risk taking mentality. Fine, I agree, but there's also risk taking mentality, and there's also just sluggish behavior. So I don't believe in that. Validate for me what you're building. Put some of your own money into it. All right, startup is all about risk. So if you're not taking the risk yourself, you can't expect the investor to take that risk, right? And then the final quadrant of what we look at is sort of other investors who are coming on board and analyzing the opportunity. And have you identified a clear go-to-market of how you want us to add value, right? So the best founders, will be the very drivers. So as investors, we don't want to take over. right? We want to be the supporting, guiding hand. So one, if you're able to pull in strong investors, that shows, you know what you're talking about, and there's big interest. And second thing of clear go-to-market identification and breakdown of how you want to spend the money also shows that as well, right? What a lot of founders will say, okay, I need 1 million. Well, why do you need 1 million? Well, development might take 500,000. Why? What's the breakdown? What's the cost of your UI? Oh, I need some for HR. Who are you hiring? How much are you going to spend on it? I need to understand that you understand these basics. And all of this, what I've said is none of this is rocket science. This is just all the very basic thing from team to product to market to analysis and investors. The best of the best founders, they keep the basic things at front, at bay, and they do that the best, right? And if you're able to do that, you'll be successful as a founder. And
Wow, I
that's
love.
ultimately what we look at.
Yeah, clearly explain, and I understood as well, like how you explain in terms of the quadrant. Makes sense. And I want to know a bit more about your TEDx talk. And I loved it, like you said, and I would put it on the show notes as well for our listeners to listen because it's quite inspirational. I have some questions just on that TEDx itself. So you said, like in your TEDx, a ship doesn't sink unless the water gets inside. So my question is, how do you cultivate like an inner strength so that no external challenges break you, or how do you like develop the strong self belief?
Yeah. I think, by the way, great question. And I think the only way to go through it, and I guess this is again for me, the only way I went ahead and did it was going through challenges, right? Calm waters don't make strong sailors. You
Yeah,
have to go through the ruffles and ripples in order to get that strength, right? If you're praying for strength, get ready for challenges because they will come. And that thing of mindset comes from going through and putting myself in uncomfortable situations where I know I'm not going to enjoy it, but I know if I just persevere, there's light at the end of the tunnel. So for me, from a very young age, it was just putting myself, or I guess partly being in those tough surroundings, right? And this is what they call the hero's dilemma, right? Where and if you don't know what I'm talking about, then they say that the hero and the villain, they both have the exact same journey, in the sense that the hero said, "The world hurt me, so now I'm going to protect it," and the villain says, "The world hurt me, and now I'm going to hurt them back." So it's a very small shift in your mind where you make a decision of, it's gonna happen and it's gonna make me better and I'm gonna go through with it. And I think the more you start to realize that's the only way out of it, yes, you can take the easy options. Yes, you can go into drugs and OnlyFans and whatever. There's a lot of bad things happening, right? And that's your easy way out. But ultimately, in the end, it's not going to fulfill you. And the earlier that you realize that and you acknowledge that, open your eyes to the world and see what's going on, the easier you'll go. It's going to be challenging, but I know in the end it's going to be worth it.
definitely. And you did mention a lot of challenges that you went through. So, for example, the COVID period hit you hard, and you said your study abroad was cancelled. You had to break up with your girlfriend, and you had 30 pounds left in your fund account, and you also missed your powerlifting competition. So, tell us about that experience and how did you push through that?
Yeah. That was terrible. I think that was one of my lowest periods of life, and I think it goes back to the aspect of challenge. I think the worst feeling for me at that time was I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't cheat. I gave it my all, and something happened which was out of my control, and it took everything that I'd been working so hard for. So, for example, the powerlifting competition, right? I was meant to be the youngest competitor from my university competing in that competition, and I trained every single day. I didn't go out to party, and this university abroad program, 4 out of 400 people got selected, and again, that was based on merit, right? That was based on applications. That was based on interviews. Relationship is relationship. I mean, whatever. But and then same with the funding accounts, right? I did so well. I grew that account up to whatever amount that I did, and then COVID came, so I just you couldn't expect a market to crash 30% in 1 week. That's just not the norm, right? And I got in a very bad place where, I just couldn't see why God would do that to me. And, I remember getting into my car at that, well, my mum's car at that point, she wasn't home. And just feeling numbness, right? A sense of hopelessness of I gave it my all, I gave it everything, and then everything got taken away in such a, you know, snap of a moment, and I couldn't do anything. It's like the ground from my feet was just taken away, right? And I was just so numb, and I'm just backing out of this driveway. I didn't know what the hell I was actually doing at that time. I think I just wanted to, go 200 miles an hour and just do something stupid, right? As I was backing out of the driveway at that point, I remember again, just in the state of pure numbness, someone from behind me just honked like really loudly because I just wasn't even paying attention to the road, and it stunned me and it almost just woke me up, right? And sometimes this is life's way of telling you that it's not your time yet. Like go get back, like go back to it. And once that happened, and I jolted back into awakening, I parked the car back because I couldn't go through with it anymore. And I just went up in my room, and there used to be a poster, which I mentioned in my TED talk, and it said, "The larger the dragon, the greater the tail." Right? Which in the sense it means that the bigger accomplishment, the bigger the accomplishment you want to have, the bigger the story you want to tell, the larger the dragon you're gonna have to slay. Right, and it still gives me goosebumps to this point. I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but it sort of comes here, and it was just that moment of realization of like, I might be down, but I'm not out yet. Not yet. It was just a sudden realization that if this is truly everything that I wanted, how can I just give up on it? I asked for something big, fine, it didn't come, but how am I just ready to give up yet? And it was just a moment shift where it was like, not yet. Like there's been too much said and done, and I'm not gonna rule that out already. It's not gonna happen. And it was just an immediate switch in the mind where I threw everything out and I was like, go again. Go again just one more time. And I think that's ultimately sometimes all we really need, where life will show you, right? That moment of that headlights, that person just behind that honk. I think that was the world's message. And I could have taken it either way. I could have just gone, fine, whatever, park the car and just be in perpetual state of depression. But I think for me it was like the world is trying to tell me something, right? And I was like, fine. Sometimes as a man, you just gotta get up and build it again. You lose it all, fine. What else are you gonna do? You're gonna sit there, you're gonna cry about it, you're gonna have nothing. Cool, you can do that, but it's gonna bring you nothing. You're gonna end up nowhere. And we all have those moments of weakness. I'm not saying having moments of weakness is wrong, but eventually you just gotta go, enough is enough. I'm gonna get back up and I'm gonna try again. Because as a man in the world, there's genuinely nothing else you can do. You have to
Yeah.
sometimes push up and go, this was tough and it took a lot out of me, but I have no other choice. I'm gonna have to get up and go again because no one's gonna come here and save me, right? I'm a grown ass man. I mean, I was 19 at the time, but still, figure it out. There's no other way out for me, and I'm really glad that I did. And life will present those opportunities to you as well, and you just gotta recognize it doesn't matter, if you're on the floor for a week, a month, or whatever, you need to take some
Yeah.
time to get back to it. But honestly, get back up because you will never regret getting back up, right? And trying. You will only regret not trying.
Love that. Love that answer. And so, what's your advice if someone's dealing with that struggle? If they're they want to come back and they have fear for the failure that will hit them again. So, what's your advice on how can they really beat that fear of failure and keep trying again,
Yeah.
irrespective of however many failures they get?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I love failure. I think people perceive failure in the wrong way, right? They think failure is something really, really bad, but I really like it. My whole thing would like anytime I hire someone, I'm like, dude, you gotta fail fast. You gotta figure out what the hell works, what doesn't work quickly, right? So get as many no's as you can on day one, ask as many questions, fail, fall, cry, bleed, whatever, pick yourself back up and go again. Right. So you got to recognize that winning teaches you nothing. And that was my example of, that on the fintech company, the trading side, where when I was winning and I was making all this money, clearly, I mean, it taught me something, but it almost taught me nothing, right? If I was just to say for the expression, because I was winning, I thought I was the Warren Buffett, right? Because I turned 1,000 into a few thousand and I was doing great. And, I thought the world needs to now respect me. But I hadn't really learned anything from it. But my failure taught me actually there needs to be more protection when you go ahead. There needs to be more balance between how you're putting out these indicators. And it happened again and again and again and again. So failure is a great thing. It teaches you many things for the future. And someone who's afraid of failing or doesn't want to fail, you fail by default, right? Because you're not taking those risks. So you're never growing. You're never outside of your comfort zone. So you're playing your life on this default fail mode. So, but by essence, you've failed.
Love that. That's an interesting perspective. And you also mentioned like this is from Conor McGregor, and I'm a huge UFC fan as well. And you mentioned like if you can see it here, and if the courage in him to speak it, it will happen. So explain that line. And do you believe in like law of attraction, like visualization? Tell us about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I recommend people to read that book. It's called The Secrets by Rhonda Byrne. And
Yeah.
it talks about the law of attraction. And I'm a massive believer in just saying it and believing it because the world will do everything to make it come true, right? Obviously, you have to do your part. But if you have that self belief, you have the courage to say it, right? Because believing is one thing, but saying it out there, putting in the world is a different thing, right? And I would always do that because then the world would have to hold it against me, right? Either people would be laughing or they'll be backing you, whatever the case is. Now you said it out there, you have to go for it, right? You have to be a man of your word. And if you really truly do that, there's some forces of nature that I don't know how to describe it. They just make
Yeah.
things happen, and you can only look at it when you look backwards and you just go, I wanted this, 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 and this, and I've done everything of it. Like I remember making this list right after the incident in 2020. The whole thing getting back in, and making like these 10 bullet points, and 9 of them I've hit already, and that was my target to hit at 30.
Oh
Right,
wow.
and,
So what did you write? Did you write the goals down you want to
yeah,
achieve, or what?
exactly, exactly. So, one of the things was I wanted to have a house before I turned 30. I bought my first house when I was 23, right?
Wow. Yeah.
The second thing was I wanted to make 100,000 in 1 month and become a millionaire. I also did that. The fourth thing
Nice.
was to buy my mum and dad a car. I ended up buying my dad a car. Right. Another thing was take my mum and dad out on a holiday, right? So I took my dad and myself and my brother out to Turkey, took my mum and my brother out to Italy. I did that as well. The next thing was, finish top of my class at university, which I ended up doing, got a valedictorian,
Yeah.
graduated out of that. The next thing was, travel more than 20 plus countries. I ended up doing that
Done
as
that
well.
as well.
All right, and I think there were two more things. I can't remember what the next couple were. The only thing I didn't do was I wanted to be 100 kgs and deadlift 300 kilos. So as I was sort of getting more and more into business, the weightlifting and the powerlifting side slightly slipped away. But everything else, I remember just finding the list maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and I just going, huh, I've I've done it. Right, and it's the power of just speaking out there, putting it out there. I'm a big believer, man, 100%. And that and 48 Laws of Power. Those two books, great.
Robert Greene.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
not the 48 laws of power, but yeah, I would ask him more questions on that. So I think one of the goals might be, if I'm not mistaken, was TEDx, because I think you did speak TEDx as well.
yeah. There we go. There
TEDx,
we
yeah,
go.
because I read
Yeah,
your LinkedIn post, I think, when I was
yeah,
researching about you. Yeah. And so how do you do it? So once you write it down, do you like keep reading it every day in the morning? Because some of the books say, or if you read it in the morning. So how do you like, or do you just write it down, forget about it, or what's the process like?
yeah. I think it depends. So for this list, I wrote it down. I maybe looked at it a couple of times, but I put it out there. Because again, like I sort of said, this is what you want to do later on, right? These were the goals that, 18, 19-year-old me wrote to achieve 11, 12 years in the future, right? So it was that longer distance. If you keep looking at something which is really far away, right? I mean, I obviously ended up doing it in the medium term, but that's the magic of it. Right. I have to focus on what tomorrow is going to hold. So you have your goal. For me, what works best for me is view it every now and then. Right. So maybe every 6 months to a year. Right. And see where you're holding up. Because sometimes goals will just need to change. Right. You might think I need to do this, this, and this. And you just go, actually, I don't need to. Right. I think one of the things was like get, 4 promotions in or something like that. And I was like, actually, that's not relevant to me anymore. I don't work corporate. Right. I was big on like corporate and scale and whatever. So for me, it's not constantly looking at it. There is one piece of paper that every time I go back home, I look at it. My home, Birmingham. Or every now and then, I'll say, and that's this piece of paper which I wrote when I was 15, and that was sort of the first instance of really someone pushing me and telling me I'm not going to be anything. And I wrote on this piece of paper that I will be the first ever trillionaire in the world. Right. And
Yeah, and your goals are all like massively huge. I think that's one another key takeaway as well.
but why not?
Yeah,
As
definitely.
humans, we get one life. If it's not gonna be the biggest and the baddest and the best, then what am I here for? All right,
Yeah,
I'm not here wishing, okay, I want to make $5,000. Like, it doesn't matter.
yeah,
If your goals don't scare you and scare people around you, then they're not big enough, and you need to think bigger. And the reason for that is, even if you miss, even if you don't end up hitting that multi-milestone goal, you'll still be in a league, in a realm where it's way beyond and above others. And even if
Mhm.
I don't end up hitting the trillion, I know I will still be a billionaire. I know that,
Yeah, that's
which
a
is
good way to
nothing to
put it.
laugh
Yeah,
about, right? It's
yeah,
one of those things. So you have to really go for something that's going to push you, that's going to scare you, that's going to keep you up at night. That's where excitement comes in, and a lot of people, they misconstrue that to anxiety. I'm like, don't look at it, don't think about it as anxiety, right? So I used to compete a lot, so I did a lot of sports, and people were like, "Do you not get anxious before matches?" And I was like, "Anxious? No, this is excitement. This is
yeah.
pure enigma I'm getting from it." Don't And again, it's all about
Perspective
mindset again.
shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting to do this. I'm here and I'm gonna do it, right? Because anxiety will make you sort of shrivel in and close yourself off. But if you thought about it from a point of excitement and
Mm.
opportunity, you're gonna be so much more of yourself.
Love that. So, what's your advice for someone who wants to start with law of attraction, or maybe they are not getting any results with law of attraction? So, what's the advice for them? Do you recommend like start with like just writing down two goals that you want to achieve, like big goals, long term, or also write down like short 6 months goals? What's the advice for that?
Yeah. I
This
mean, look,
this is fascinating, right? And more like
yeah.
yeah.
No,
Go on.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, look, writing it, saying it, speaking it, putting it out there on your social, whatever the case is, great. But you also have to apply, right? And again, there's a saying in Hindi, and I'll have to sort of translate it. And it's वो तिनका भी उस डूबने वाले की मदद करता है जो उसकी तरफ तैरता है, right? And the
Yeah.
translation is, even that piece of wood will only help that drowning man who tries to swim towards it. So you can say and bang on about, oh, I've written it, and there's a lot of people that do that,
Yeah.
right? Which are one of the worst people. I say, always stay away. And these people are worse than lazy people. Lazy, motivated people are worse because they talk about it and they'll waste your time talking about it, but not actually do it. So,
I agree.
going back to that saying, it's like, if you're not actively trying to do for it, all this enchantment affirmation, it's all then bullshit. Fine, you've
Yeah.
written about it, great, you've taken step one, but actually try and pursue what you're doing. Look at yourself, right? Are you really truly doing what you're meant to be doing to get there, right? Are you really giving it your 100%? Are you cutting corners? And you truly know that. I can't answer that for you. Only you can, right? I can answer it for myself, and I know what's the truth, and you know what's the truth, right? So if you know, I think you just need to sit in the mirror and have an honest conversation with yourself of like, how badly do you want something? And if you want it bad enough, you'll do what it takes to make it happen. And I said this in my TED and a few other interviews, right? That I got asked, where it was, there was a phase in my life where I worked, almost 21 hours a day for about six,
Wow.
to the point, I remember right towards the end, I just couldn't leave the bed, but it got me where I needed to be, right? That was a phase in life where I was exiting my 9 to 5, but wasn't quite done. So, I would wake up at 8 a.m. I would head for my 9 to 5. I'd come back at around 6 p.m. And then I was doing my diploma at Harvard at that time. So, at that time I had to sort of go and, do the online classes at about 6 p.m. and those would finish around 10 p.m. And then
Wow.
at 10 p.m., I would eat, I would sort of take rest of the stuff together. And then because I'd started the business and I was serving mainly US clients to begin with, the only time I would have was in the night. So from, 10:30, 11 p.m. to about 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, I'd be doing all the emails, cold outreach, report making, data, deliverables, calls, and I would end up going to bed around 4, 4:30 and would wake back up around 8. And that's what it took, right? So you need to understand that affirmations and paperwork and listening
Yeah,
and talking about is great, but applicability is what's going to, make you win. And if you don't apply yourself, all of this that you are talking about it and having a
yeah.
nice, book collection or, charms or whatever, they're not going to result in anything.
Hmm. No, definitely agree. And it's not just gonna work if you're just sitting down on a couch and just visualizing. And that the saying that you said in Hindi perfectly sums up what you said about law of attraction. Definitely. And since you mentioned Robert Greene's book, 48 Laws of Power, tell me like which law is your favorite one, or that have you applied in your business or
That's a tough
life?
one. That's a tough one. I think there's a couple.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to try and recall which one it was, which number it comes on. But I think one of the laws of power is talking about listening and not always sort of being the I don't know
Yes,
how
one or
exactly.
two, I guess. I think talk less than necessary, something like that.
Yeah. I think it's number two or it's number two, but it's also I think there's one in the fees. It's basically again talking about the presence and the power of listening. I think and this the person who knows nothing says everything. The person who knows something says something, and the person who knows everything says nothing. Right? Because you need to be able to, in order to make a decisive decision, you need all the information in the room, right? You need to be able to absorb, you need to sit, you need to think. And if you're constantly talking, how are you doing that? Because you're just seeing that from one perspective. So I think, often people go in that belief that if I want, and again, people misunderstand that from my statement of being bold. Statement of being bold isn't all about just talking and being big. It's also about listening and having the presence and knowing when to talk rather than just opening your mouth and blabbering. There's a lot of those people out there. And trust me, if you become that, people will kick you out immediately. Because the people who are at the top, they recognize that. Right? I've been in rooms with multi-billionaires who I didn't realize were multi-billionaires right at the end, where they said something and I was like, hold on a minute, right? There's no way that and that goes together where you're someone really, really accomplished. Right. And their best quality is they will just sit and listen and listen and listen. Right. And then they'll say, "Oh, actually, I need to participate or I don't." And they're fine with that. So I think definitely try to listen. Most of the time, the world will tell you, the client will tell you, what it needs. Right. Just ask the right questions, be inquisitive. So and this applied to me very early on where the reason I grew really fast was I just listened to what the customers were saying. They were saying that I've tried this and this. Okay, well, what else have you done? Well, I've also gone for this. Why hasn't it worked? Well, I think it's because of this. And just sitting there and listening rather than, what people try and do in business is just from day one, well, I can do this and I've also done this and I've also and they just haven't even asked the consumer what the problem is. Why hasn't something worked? Right? And what else have you tried? And what have you been doing? And what do you think will work? Right? What do you like to do? What do
Yeah.
you think you can do? And sitting and just understanding that. So I think that was a really big one for me.
Amazing. I think also it boils down to what questions we ask as well. Makes sense. And this is same. My podcast is about asking questions. I don't share that much knowledge, but it's asking questions so that we can learn from the guests, definitely. So I have a last question from you. Since you mentioned that you speak to like billionaires, a lot of successful people. So what interpersonal skills stands out in the most successful people you have met?
Mhm. Probably the most interpersonal things is they are great at one, understanding what needs to be done, right? In the sense that when you're at larger conferences, you will hear a lot of information, right? And there's a lot of fluff around what is important. The really, really people at the top, they understand what are the key points and what needs to be done straight away, and they take action right away. Right. So I met a sheikh, and he's part of the royal family in Abu
What?
Dhabi. Right. And we're talking about something, I can't reveal exactly what, but, it's a project and, certain things needed to be done. And he said, give me a number. Right. We'll sort something out. right? And I gave him the number, and by the time I was walking away, going back into the hall and sitting down, he had already pinged his PA. His PA had already sent out an invite, and on that invite it said what the next steps for this needs to be.
Oh, wow.
And that was maybe in the matter of 80 seconds, 90 seconds, right? Whilst we were talking, he took my number, he texted his PA something, he dropped a voice note. And by the time I got back to my seat, I knew exactly, and I was like, whoa. So the speed at which they work and their ability to just pick up key information and sort, gold from shit covered in gold is so, so good. I think that's a really big one. And then the second one is you have to be, I mean, not necessarily liked, but they're very good with their people skills. They're natural born salesmen, they're natural born sort of charismatic people, right? And this I saw massively in the corporate structure, where there are people who are really gifted at what they do, but they're not gifted on the people side. And business is all about people. You can be the best at what you do, but if people think you're an asshole, you'll always be stuck at somewhat of a ceiling. That's why when most of the corporates, the people who are at the top, the reason they're easier to speak to than middle management is because that middle management has that ego place, right? And anyone who's risen above the top, the only reason they're there because not because of obviously their own merit, but people around them also like them. And if they didn't, they wouldn't be there. So I think that's a big thing. They're very charismatic character, and they just know how to sell, and they just know how to get things done. So I think those two things are the biggest things that I've seen in guys who are, doing super, super well.
Love that answer. And sense of urgency is really important, like in business and in corporate as well. Definitely. I really enjoyed talking to you, Anmol. It's been a amazing 1 hour. I feel like I'm fired up to like go after every goal of mine now. Love it. And for our listeners, I'll link Anmol's all social media handles in the show notes, and also his TEDx that I highly recommend you guys to listen to, because I've listened to it like 3 4 times already in the preparation for this, and I really enjoyed it. Yes, and make sure you comment below what's your key takeaway from this episode. And Anmol, thank you so much once again. It's been a real honor and pleasure to talk to you this evening.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being here, and I hope someone has got some value out of this. And don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you once again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.